Welcome to the LDHR podcast, the place to learn, explore, develop, and connect so that we and those we lead are known, needed, and have a future. In this series, we're exploring our member care model and discovering what it looks like to live out and lead through master care, self-care, team care, and movement care. We will hear from people all over the world how they're living this out and how we can learn from them. Come on in and listen. We're so glad you're here. Mike Maney, welcome to the LDHR podcast. I'm so glad you're able to join us. Before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about your current role and where you are serving?
Yes, thanks, Beth, for giving me this opportunity. I live in Budapest, Hungary, where my family and I have been for the past 9 years. I've served with LDHR here the whole time. Most recently, I am the regional leader for LDHR for Europe.
Great. Well, welcome. We've been walking through our member care model for a couple weeks now, and we're kind of wrapping it up looking at the part of the member care model of movement care. And we specifically are focusing on how we can provide care through a network of specialists to help with the holistic well-being of every staff member. So, Mike, why is it essential for organizations to establish a network of specialist care providers for their staff?
Well, I think we know that sometimes the care and development needs of our staff exceed what we're equipped to provide well for. We are a highly specialized organization, and by having a network of specialists, we can partner with others in the body of Christ to provide for the needs of our staff while keeping our focus on our unique mission.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So, how does having a reliable referral network enhance the well-being of team members?
It's interesting. When I first came as a staff care specialist to our region, it seemed like staff became much more willing to even just talk about some of the areas and challenges that they were facing. And so, I think that even just having an acknowledgement of, it's important to have this network encourages people to engage with those challenges that they're having in ways they might not have felt safe to do before. And those challenges often are getting in the way of their overall health and even keeping them from being fulfilled and effective in their ministry. And also having that network ready and prepared for them can save our staff time from having to do their own research, their own searching for resources, possibly coming across some that aren't that helpful, that haven't been vetted. By doing this for our staff, it basically can help them streamline getting access to the resources they need.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I like the part about them not having to vet these people themselves. I mean, again, staff life is busy. We're focused on helping others. And so having known and trusted people that they can turn to, I think is helpful. So what criteria do you recommend to evaluate and select specialists to be a part of this network?
Well, it can be helpful to research a little about the field that the specialists are specialized in to know kind of what to look for. In my case, I had the opportunity to study psychology, theology, and pastoral care. So for me, I can learn a lot by reading a Christian counselor or spiritual director's online biography, look at where they got their education, reading what their specializations are, or many times you can even see what kind of resources they recommend can tell you a lot about where they're coming from. Now, obviously, not everybody has the opportunity to go that deep in research and study. Oftentimes, though, just a little bit of research on the internet can actually give you a feel for knowing what you can expect from certain providers. And however, there really is no replacement from getting feedback from people who have actually used the specialist.
Yeah.
So if there are staff who have already gone out and found resources, ask them what their experience was like, find out if they'd be willing to recommend places. Getting their feedback really is probably the best way of being able to vet them.
Absolutely. So what kind of people do you recommend having on this list of specialists? What kind of people are you looking for?
Well, a lot of it depends on what your staff's greatest needs are. Many times there's a lot of different specializations that we can look at, but I think most often we're thinking about people who are in the member care field of counseling, spiritual direction, debriefing, and so forth. And for those people, we're often looking for specialists who have both a good education in their specialization, but also they're rooted in, biblical principles, and that they haven't just slapped the name Christian on top of whatever their profession is, but there's, definitely a deep commitment to Christ, and that they understand the importance of what our staff do.
Yeah, thanks. So, kind of in what ways, from your experience, how has a network helped foster a culture of care and support within a ministry, within the organization?
As I mentioned before, there can be even intangible effects of where once that network is in place and people feel more safety to talk about things, it often helps the culture of your organization where people are more willing to be vulnerable with each other. That naturally increases a sense of trust within the organization, helps build community. And many times it actually creates the environment that reduces the need for that specialist network. It will be able to meet their own needs within a community that might not even have come about without saying it's okay to use outside resources for your health and your well-being.
Yeah, that's really great. It sounds like it's normalizing some of those practices and going and getting some help. And then when people talk about that, it helps others as well. Have there been any times or circumstances where that hasn't been the case for you, where it hasn't been normal for people to go out and get specialized care? And how have you overcome that?
Well, sadly, yes. Many times it's not anybody's fault. Circumstances sometimes lead to an environment where people have to be very focused on, the here and the now. And sometimes that goes on for too long and people do end up burning out. I think that, it takes a leader who has the courage to step out and say, we can pause on this. God is big enough to where we can stop the things that we're doing and be able to give attention to our own care and our own development to be able to really kind of break out of that season and that time.
Yeah, thank you. Really helpful. I think sometimes we do get caught up in the work and we don't want to pause as leaders. We feel like it won't continue if we're not there, but that is an act of trusting God to say we need some help and that this is ultimately in His hands, not ours. You had mentioned before about creating like a list of specialists, how feedback has helped create a good list. So, how do you gather feedback from staff about their experiences within the specialist network while maintaining confidentiality?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. In most cases, if it's possible, I prefer to do it informally, having a conversation with the person asking how their experience was, whether they'd recommend the provider to other people. If it has to be over email, sometimes I can do it that way. But I think it could also be just as good to create a Google survey that is anonymous and just have some standard questions that you send to people afterward. One good thing that I think to ask is not only, how was the provision, but also how did they charge? Many providers will donate their time, and so it might be free. Some might say if they're a faith-based organization also, they may ask for a suggested donation. And then others have a sliding scale that's based on the salary of the person they're providing for. So that can be really important as many of our staff are, on a budget and have that it can be a concern or a barrier.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Some of the quality of care, but also some of that practicality of how much, yeah, is this going to cost? Because yeah, that can very often be a barrier for people, and for them to know either it's a gift or if it's on a sliding scale. Those are some really great feedback to have on each person. So, what are some common misconceptions about specialist care networks that you'd like to address?
Yeah, this one is something that I've seen myself make a mistake on, and many team leaders as well. That I think often we wait too long to reach out for help. I think that we, being often very responsible people as leaders, we think that we should be able to do it ourselves and that it'd be too impersonal to invite people outside the organization to come and help. Yeah, I've found that many times specialists are totally willing to come alongside our leaders partner together to provide contextualized quality care without it becoming this like outside experience. But even when there is an outside experience, I've found that, the specialists are often very willing to learn about our organization beforehand to be able to make it something that is a fairly seamless kind of experience for our staff. Now, with that said, I think there is another misconception that I think many of us know is that sometimes we think that using mental health counselors in particular, that there's a fear of encouraging staff to address deeper issues can become a distraction from the mission of our organization because it sometimes does mean that people will even get a little worse before they get better because they're addressing things that are possibly very painful. But despite the time and the energy it takes away, I think it really is a very worthy investment to help our staff overcome these challenges. It affects their well-being, but naturally it leads to greater fulfillment and effectiveness in their ministries as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. I think for me, just that reminder that sin, every person is valuable to the Lord, and for them to slow down and get some healing, get some chances to dig deeper is not a waste of time. It is valuable because they are too cared for by the Lord. So thank you for that reminder. So let's kind of get practical of what advice would you give to other leaders looking to establish or improve a specialist care network within their country or context? How can they go about doing this?
Well, in general, I'd say pursue it in the same way that we often do when seeking God's provision for other ways. Start with praying and asking God for his provision. Look around and see where he may already be providing that you just haven't noticed before. Boldly make your needs known and ask others to partner with you. Some particular ways to get started, you can ask your regional leadership. Many times they might have a starting place for you. You can ask the leadership of local churches and other Christian organizations for suggestions of where to find providers. Social media can be a great place to find connections. A lot of this is about networking, and there's several online or on social media networks. The Global Member Care Network on Facebook is a good place to start. Depending on where you're at, there may be organizations like Barnabas International or Member Care Associates or other member care organizations that might have staff in your area, and just going to their website and searching can help you know what is there. But I'd also say don't get overwhelmed with this idea that it has to be this really long list. Start small with just the things that are the most needed resources for your staff, and it can grow from there organically as you meet more people and as people experience God's provision.
Yeah. That's helpful that it doesn't need to be a fully complete list to begin with, to start somewhere. And as time and life happens, you'll be able to add to it as you go along. But thank you for some of those specific resources you mentioned. We'll make sure we link to them in the show notes below. One other practical question is, say someone has started to create a list of specialists. How do they get that out to their staff? How do they communicate what's available, kind of bridge that gap to say, we have these people, we want to give them to you. How do you, bridge that gap?
Yeah, so in my case, I don't necessarily share that resource broadly. I like to have a conversation with people who are seeking recommendations of resources because there are nuances to each person's needs that I think mean that I can look at my list and say what I think is the best recommendation versus, again, if the list is long, it can be overwhelming, and choosing somebody just based on the words that are on the page may not be the best. And so I'd say, you know, putting it on, your different forms of media on occasion, your different communications, to remind people that we have that resource. If you do choose to post it publicly for all of your staff, I would put somewhere on there, that you highly recommend reaching out to your LDHR provider to have a conversation before choosing a resource, just to help you be able to navigate how to make the best choice.
Yeah, I think that is so helpful. Like you said, some of these most of the time it's nuanced. And for you to be able to recommend someone specifically for a certain context, I think is so helpful because if you're at the point where you do feel overwhelmed and just seeing a list of 15 names, you don't know where to begin, you don't know how to jump in, but to have, yeah, the LDHR leader come in and say, "Hey, I recommend this one," I think can be
Yeah,
really helpful.
for sure.
That's great.
Sometimes people need coaching in figuring out what their priorities are as well, and being able to surface if someone prefers a male or a female, prefers somebody, in person versus virtual. Again, the payment, what they're able to pay and so forth. Being able to find out which one is the highest priority is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, thank you so much for talking with me today about movement care and how we can provide the specialist care that our staff need at different points. And so I appreciate you. Thank you for the work that you are doing. And thanks for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us on our journey through our member care model. I hope you were encouraged today and learned from Mike Maney about the importance of developing a network of specialist care for our members, as well as some tangible ways to build that network. If you've enjoyed any or all of these podcasts that walk you through our member care model, please share them with a friend, as it really helps us get the word out. And if you haven't already, you'll want to hit that subscribe button. We're taking a 2-week break, but we'll return in December and January with a mini series that creates space for LDHR leaders and anyone in ministry to pause, reflect, and realign with what matters most. You don't want to miss it. See you then.